All right, ladies and gentlemen, we're in for a real treat on Sportswire Radio as we kick off our 1-2 punch of coverage here from our friends over at New British Promotions Wrestling. It's right before Bank Holiday Week, and they have a huge show this Friday. And our guest, figuratively and literally, is going to be one of those big components of that. You've seen him in a number of different places across the Yorkshire wrestling scene. He has been a world champion. He has dominated. His moveset speaks for itself. He has pretty much shown why he is one of the rising stars in the UK wrestling scene over the past year. And he's going to talk about what he's doing here this coming weekend. He's going to be tag teaming with an old friend of ours here that has been on many times on Sportswire Radio and Young Horace. But because it's his first time here, he needs no further introduction, but because this is the first time he's here, as I just pointed out, and he probably doesn't know what I'm about to do, I'm going to give him this big, grandiose entrance that he's not used to when he's wrestling in other companies. So let's get to it. So with that, without further ado here on the Sports Report, the number one global sports show from New British Promotions Wrestling. They call him Kemper. Joshua Kemper. My friend, I hope you heard that call.
I did. What an intro. Thank you, Tom.
Pleasure. Yeah, I figured that. I figured you do some of these podcasts and you kind of get the usual, hi, how are you? Nice to meet you. But I've been doing this for 5 years, and I always tell people there'll be one thing I'm remembered for, and those intros. But obviously, it's a tremendous honor, and I can't thank you enough for the opportunity. And, for those that are listening and watching here on Sportswire Radio, as I talked about here, we're starting this 1-2 punch of coverage here from New British Promotions Wrestling. You're going to be a part of it here in this big tag team match with some people that I've actually covered on Sportswire Radio. Some I've even had on many times in Young Horace. And you're going to be tag teaming with Young Horace against La Flama and West Danger, who actually wrestled each other at the last show. But they're teaming against you guys this show coming up. And for those that are listening and watching here on Sportswire Radio, Mr. Kemper, talk about what we can expect here in one of these rather odd matches that we'll see here as we kick off Bank Holiday Weekend from our friends at NBPW.
Yeah, sure. So Horace and I have gone back quite a few years now. We've known each other for a long time.
Yes.
Similar mindsets, similar outlooks on life. And then since kind of we both came into New British Promotions, we kind of aligned straight away just because of that familiarity of knowing each other.
We spoke about that when he was here. Yep.
Yeah. And then we've ended up aligning in the ring as well. So it's been up and down for us. Some things have gone well, some things not so well. At the last show, unfortunately, Horace lost his match against Tiger, and he took that out on me. I was just trying to help, and things got almost a little bit physical. I almost lost my cool, but we took it down a level, and we're tag teaming again this Friday. And I'm hoping that he's kind of put those things behind him now, and we can just get on and we can dominate these guys, because let's face it, like we should be beating these guys. They're great wrestlers.
Based on your size and strength, what Young Horace has done in multiple promotions. I mean, I've covered him, I think, in like 1, 2, 3, at least 4 promotions now at this point. So he's a guy that has been pretty much all over the place, has established himself. You've established yourself as just one of the most impressive big men in the ring. You're not just this guy that just, does a punch, kick, and a choke slam. You pretty much do a number of different things in your arsenal. So I kind of think here, maybe this is the start where we go back to the drawing board. We forget about what happened at the last show and kind of use this show as a springboard for the rest of the year here for some big things in NBPW.
That's it. Yeah. I mean, we've got the tools to beat any team on our day. And also we're coming up against like West Danger, who's phenomenal, but he's just a kid. Like,
I know. Yeah.
He shouldn't be beating us. And I'm not going to let that happen. And equally, La Flama, he's not a kid, but he's very experienced. He's just
I think if they put the two of them together, I still don't think they're bigger than you.
Yeah, they're not the tallest of teams. Maybe if they all got in a big coat on top of each other's shoulders, but
Maybe, yeah, maybe.
I'm hopeful and optimistic that we can put the bad things behind us and we'll win this match comfortably.
All right, let me ask you this question because I know Horace pretty well. I know kind of how he thinks. I've seen a lot of him in the ring, but I also know he's somebody that's kind of got his own opinions. I'm
Mhm.
curious, since the last show, have you guys spoke a lot or communicated after what happened? Because Horace, I know, is a very reflective individual. So I'm curious for
Mhm.
the audience and especially what we can expect coming up here at Bank Holiday Weekend. Have you guys spoke a lot since what went down?
Um, we've spoken. It's been a little frosty, as you might imagine. You know, it's one of those things. All friendships, you have these moments where you're not going to agree on everything.
Sure, sure.
But for him to put his hands on me like that and expect me to just take it was probably not his smartest decision, in my
I
opinion.
would think so. Look at you,
Yeah,
6'5". I mean, your move set, your size. I mean, you're
yeah.
a guy. If I would have put my hands on you, you'd probably kill me. So I mean, you must be a really patient man right now, Mr. Horace.
Possibly patient to a fault. But we'll see. We'll try and smooth things out. We have spoken. We're riding down to the show together. We're going to try and just get on with it and, like I say, put the mistakes behind us. It's something stupid that shouldn't have happened, and I think we're better than that.
And certainly, listen, things do happen. So there's no question that obviously there's always ups and downs, peaks and valleys when it
Hmm.
comes to these things. And, and I kind of think, and tell me your thoughts on it, because in a way, Bank Holiday Weekend is basically kind of maybe the last weekend of the summer here in the
Hmm.
UK. We'll have Labor Day weekend next week in America. But do you feel like because it's kind of like this kickoff or unofficial kickoff to Bank Holiday Weekend here for you guys that maybe there's more extra riding on this show, and maybe because you got more people or more eyeballs coming to the show, that maybe this gives you guys maybe some motivation to turn things around? I'm curious on your thoughts on that.
Yeah, I think so. I think just in the wrestling sphere as well. This weekend is big. We've got All In happening in England on
Yep.
Sunday. So there's a lot of buzz around wrestling as a whole. There are shows on from Friday through to Monday across the country, and it matters. Like, this show is going to be important for us, and it's important that we get off to the right start and don't have any kind of silly misunderstandings or whatever it was last time, because people will be watching. You're right. There's going to be a lot riding on this for both of us, and we can't really afford to take another loss as a team, to be honest. So it's going to be very important how it turns out, and I'm hoping it's for the best. But
Well, I have no doubt. Listen, I know Horace's ability, and I've got a chance to watch a little bit of your abilities here in the last week. And you talked about obviously All In, and certainly it set a record for tickets sold, and I'll leave that at that. But do you feel like right now, maybe in the last week, that there's a buzz, and does that give you a pep in your step? Do you notice, like, even about this show, that there's extra buzz? Because in a way, this is kind of like, how can I put it, in a way, this is kind of like WrestleMania to the UK, where it's almost like you've got this show that is sold so many tickets. You're in Wembley, and you guys obviously have had some buzz to begin with. I've covered this company, for a while, on and off, the past several months, and a lot of your different colleagues have come on here in the past. But
mhm.
do you feel like, in a way, that there's a buzz, an extra buzz, that maybe as a residual is coming here and maybe gives you kind of a pep in your step individually?
Yeah, I think so. I think I love the attention being on me and being able to perform and show people what I can do. Which is strange because in my personal life that is the opposite of how I am. But when it comes to wrestling, I want people to see just how good I am. So it's been a hell of a week, and I just want it to get better and better.
Oh, I think it is. And I want people to follow Mr. Kemper himself. He is on Instagram and Facebook at the Joshua Kemper. You can also follow New British Promotions Wrestling at NBP Wrestling on Facebook, Instagram. They're also on YouTube as well. The company does a great job. We're really excited about this Friday show. And my name is the Reverend Tom Bryce. But you said something interesting there. Almost you don't want the spotlight on you. And a guy like you, who's a big man, who's been a world champion, who's just, a guy that's a lot of buzz about you. I mean, for the audience out here, and maybe some of the NBPW fans that are listening to this that may not know, why is that? I mean, I know you've obviously gone through some different things, and maybe
Mhm.
for the newer audience here, why do you maybe only now are starting to get comfortable in the spotlight?
I think, well, my entire life, I've kind of suffered with anxiety, if you want to call it suffering. I don't, whatever terminology you want to use. I've had anxiety in my entire life. And it's not until I feel competent and confident that I want people to pay attention, really. And I'm at a point in my wrestling career where I do feel competent and confident. And
You
I feel
should.
like,
I mean, look at what you do in the ring. I mean, you are 6'5". You're probably almost 300 pounds here at American weight. I mean, I've seen what you do in the ring. Your move set. I mean, if I was you, I would be really confident, and I would just want to go out there and kick some butt every time.
yeah, pretty much. I'm starting to feel a bit untouchable, to be honest.
You should.
My ego sometimes gets a little bit out of control, but you know what? Sometimes that's good. Sometimes you need that. You need to have a big ego. You need to be selfish. You've got to push yourself. So,
it's funny you said that, and you used the word confidence. And I've been doing this for 5 years, and it actually comes up because I do a lot of here in America basketball, college basketball, and one of my friends who's an analyst here on Sportswire Radio was an ex-college basketball player, was relatively successful and was now coaching. And he's always used the word confidence. And confidence, his name is the brute force Brad Weiss. In fact, he's almost as tall as you. He's about 6'4". You're about 6'5". So that'd be an interesting comparison. But he's always talked about having confidence. You almost have to go into things with a mindset, whether it's being on the basketball court, the football field around the world, or in the wrestling ring where you kick some butt. And talk about how maybe this mindset that you've gotten into where you've finally gotten this confidence has kind of boiled over, and where you've had this success, whether you've been the PPW world champion and been in the ring with the likes of an Aaron Sharp and what we've seen here in NBPW. So can we talk about kind of this confidence factor that has kind of maybe helped elevate where you finally found yourself?
yeah, for sure. So I'm wrestling for about 4.5 years now. And I started training with Pursuit pretty much a year ago now. And I had a really good basis on like the fundamentals and like the chain style of wrestling and like the world of sport style, because I've been training with Marty Jones for all that time as well.
Oh, I know him very well. Squared Circle Academy. In fact, I think we have a show there on September the 8th, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes, doubleheader, 8th and 9th.
Yep, we have, I think Joel Cobra's going to be there. Somebody I know very well, and the Big Cheese Logan. Boy, what a small world, Mr. Kemper. What
Indeed.
a small world.
But yeah, I'd kind of gained a lot from working with Marty and opportunities that he's been able to give to me to get to other places that I wouldn't have got to otherwise in the kind of stages of my career that I was at. But then I started training at Pursuit as well. And I think it's really elevated me having a different perspective, having that kind of modern style as well as the like old school style.
Sure.
It's given me a kind of whole new lease and a whole new outlook on like how to perform in the ring. And as well, just athletically, like I've put a lot of work into my strength and speed and stuff in the last sort of 6 months. And I don't think there's many people in the British scene that are on my level when it comes to athleticism. And there are people who can do more flips than me, but there's not many people that can move with the kind of speed and size that I have.
It's funny you said that. I want to come back to the Squared Circle Academy here in a few minutes, but it's funny you said that because you're a big man and you don't move like a big man. And you think about even just like some of the UK big men, because I've obviously been covering a lot of UK wrestling for a long time now. And there are certain guys, and God bless them, I'm not going to point out big men, but they don't move like you do. They don't have the agility. They don't have the arsenal in their ring skills. And I mean, was that kind of something that was like you wanted to do where you set yourself out? Because again, some of that you might have been cognizant of that. And maybe some of it you had actually the God-given abilities to do that. Because it's very hard, again, for a big man, especially even in the UK. Because you think about some of the big men that we have in the scene and they don't do what you do in the ring. So kind of talk about that aspect.
Yeah, so it's not something I kind of came in with a great desire to do. I've always wanted to be like a power moves wrestler. That's where I thrive, because I can do things in terms of strength that other smaller guys can't do. So that is something that I'm always going to have in my arsenal. But when we would do things at training, there isn't a whole lot of other heavyweights, especially in the UK. So I am training similar drills and similar techniques to guys that are kind of average height or smaller. And then I would do these things and I'd be able to do them as well. So we would be like doing banderas over the ropes and like doing nip ups and things like that. And I could do it. So I was like, well, you know what? I'm going to keep that in my back pocket. And when I need to do it, I'll pull it out, because just because we're taller and heavier and all this stuff doesn't mean that we're not capable of pulling off these feats of athleticism.
I mean, I love Joel Cobra, but I mean, I don't know if Joel's able to pull off all those moves you do. I mean, Disciple was obviously a big time supporter of us. We've had him on many times, and I love Disciple, but I don't know if he could do all those moves. That then there's the Big Cheese Logan, which I'm going to have on next week, and I'll have to probably bring this up. But I mean, that's so fascinating. You talk about this stuff, and I will come back to some of those people in a second. But I mean, Marty Jones is obviously a legend, and Marty Jones certainly, he has his opinions. He's very opinionated, Marty Jones. So yeah, I have to ask, certainly for the audience and those that'll probably check this out later on. I mean, what advice does he give? Because he definitely gives advice. One thing I've learned about Mr. Jones, he definitely speaks his mind. And what have you learned in trying to pick his brain?
So much stuff. Like I said, the first 3.5 years of my wrestling was all with Marty. There was I would do sometimes a seminar here and there with the other people, but almost all my training was with Marty. So it was a real focus on intensity, the fundamentals, not letting silly things that you need to learn from day one get away from you, because if you can't do the basics, it's all well and good if you can jump off the top rope and do a flip, but if you can't do the basics, you're going to lose and you're not going to get very far in this game. So you need to be able to do everything that is the core of wrestling really well. So that's kind of the main thing.
It's funny you said that, because I hear this all the time. I speak with wrestlers from all over the world at this point, and a lot of them will tell me, Tom, anybody can do that big high spot, that big move that everybody watches on TV, but can you do in a match where you pace yourself, where you go out there and are able to do, let's say, that 15, 20, 25 minutes where you can really almost call the match and be able to pull off things that also your opponent is equal to? So I think that that's really some great advice there, and kind of some similar advice I had on from one of my guests last week. That was Vito Fratelli, who's gone on and won some things in Mexico, like the Lucha Libre Championship, and wrestled Alexander Hammerstone, the MLW World Champion at the time. So those are stuff that I definitely could certainly envision. But I have to ask you, I mean, you have a funny story or two, any story or thought on a Joel Cobra? Because Joel Cobra I had on last week, and I'm sure that Mr. Cobra might be listening to this. So you have any share of memories of training with a Joel Cobra?
Nothing super funny that springs to mind. We get on well.
Anything particular? Because he's another guy, obviously. His family, for those that don't know, is been in wrestling, and he's kind of one of these guys that's kind of been around in a long time and in different ways. And Joel's always training for something. In fact, I just spoke to, I can't say it on the air, but I just saw something with Joel 15 minutes ago. So, so Joel's a great guy, though, by the way.
Yeah, he's a very likable guy. Everyone gets on with him. And like I say, him and along with Dave and Modern Day Mafia, they're doing good things. So
yes.
I've nothing bad to say about him. I don't have any particularly funny stories off the top of my head. I'm sorry. But,
no problem. No. Well, you said they were good. Obviously, certainly they put a lot into training, and I appreciate that you at least gave them a mention. But we are here on Sportswire Radio, speaking all things related to NBPW and more, with one of the guys I'm really excited about the future for here, and that is Mr. Kemper himself, the Joshua Kemper, on Instagram and Facebook. Give him a follow. We are definitely hearing the call with him. My name is the Reverend Tom Bryce, and if you're on YouTube, give us a follow on Sportswire Radio. We're also on Twitter at Thomas Bryce 2017. Instagram at the Sports Report 2021, and 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. You can listen to all of our great content on sportnarium.com/player, and also be back here tomorrow a little after 9 o'clock Eastern time with Dante Durden. And Dante Durden is going to talk about his huge match coming up with CJ Banks. And that's going to be a really, really intriguing match. No count and falls anywhere, no DQ match. So really looking forward to that match. It'll be falls count anywhere, no DQ. You can find out here more information on that later today, also on our Instagram and also NBPW socials. But right now we are having a great time here with Mr. Kemper himself, Joshua Kemper, who was the PPW World Heavyweight Champion. And you got to talk to me a little further about this moveset. You got Call of the Void. You've got some stuff out there on YouTube that's generated thousands of views, whether it's the Power Bomb, whether it's the Power Slam you've done. I mean, all these different things that you've done in the ring. I mean, just talk about the moveset and just kind of, what inspired you to come across these moves.
I guess some of my inspirations were, so when I was growing up and even to this day, I enjoyed watching the big guys wrestle.
Sure.
So like my favorites as a kid were like Brock Lesnar, Goldberg, these kind of characters. I also really like Test.
Yeah,
So
Test was kind of an underrated kind of what maybe now, maybe because God rest his soul, he kind of hasn't been with us for a long time. But in that era, certainly the Attitude Era, kind of was an underrated guy. I mean, he had a lot of success, and he was in a number of different components. He was obviously aligned with Lance Storm, Christian for a while, the Corporation, and
mhm.
Stephanie McMahon famously. But as a big man, he did a lot of different things in the ring, and kind of gets overlooked, I think.
Yeah, and his big boot is the greatest big boot of all time. And that was for a while my finishing move. I would hit a big boot. But the problem with that is um, it's great because you can hit it on anyone, but it all really depends on who is taking it as to how good it looks. So
Uh,
it's I got a bit frustrated with people not taking it very well, and I kind of use it as more of a signature move.
Why is that? Is that because of the size of who you are? I mean, you have a 16-foot size shoe, so I mean, maybe that
Mhm.
has something to do with it. But why is that not everybody takes the move the way that you want without getting too technical? Why is that?
Um, Maybe a bit of fear, because it's quite a daunting move to take. It's all well and good
Sure.
me saying I'm going to kick you in the face, but they have to be like, okay, fine. um, it's it in its essence, it's a super basic thing to do because it's just a back bump. You're just falling back with a bit of a snap. But for some reason, people would like move out of the way, or they would like kind of take it in the hands and like crumble, and or they'd move before I touched them, and then it just looked terrible. And it was like, you know what? Maybe this isn't the one.
See, I would think though in wrestling, at least from what I've learned, because I've spoke to so many wrestlers at this point, that every move's gonna hurt. Now you have to basically, it's kind of like give and take. So I mean,
Hmm.
ultimately, you're gonna take their move. Well, shouldn't they take your move? I mean, obviously, you've adjusted to it, but certainly a big boot on your YouTube page has gotten thousands of views, and some of your other moves like your power bomb and certainly your power slam, all those different things, you've been able to
Hmm.
do that. And even the match you just had with Music Man, not getting into kind of the outcome of it, that there was a move, I think, in the match where he was basically climbing the ropes like the Undertaker. Then he
Hmm.
walked right into you, basically power slamming him almost. I thought that was really fascinating. There was some different spots that you did where, even some of you, I think your most two recent matches that I watched, Alan Kay and Music Man. I mean, what the both of yous did as big men. I mean, I have to say it. I mean, I watch a lot of wrestling because we cover different people around the world. They were probably two of the better matches I've seen with big men, like maybe this year, just in terms of what you guys did. And I mean, just how did you feel about that in a way? Because I know we were speaking off the air about this, but I kind of think in watching these two matches, I was really impressed with both of what you guys were able to do in those matches.
Yeah. Well, first of all, thank you for that. I appreciate the compliment there. The thing with Music Man, that was a like rematch basically. So
Mm-hmm.
we'd had a match before. It went down really well. I was told that it was one of the best matches that happened at PPW, which is great news for me.
Sure.
But then obviously you learn someone's move set, and then you can adapt to the next match to say, okay, well, normally he goes up on the top rope, he grabs the hand, he does the Undertaker style big club down to the back. But I was like, well, I know it's coming this time, so I'm going to pull you down and catch you. So it was a lot of kind of knowing what each other were going to do, and also because when I work with another big guy, I feel like I have more free reign to do more outrageous stuff, more like athletic stuff. Because if I'm nipping up against someone that's 5'5", it makes them look bad. Whereas if I'm doing it against someone that's 6'3", 6'4", then it just makes me look good.
Well, it's a match. Okay, if I'm wrestling somebody 5'5", in your case, people are going to expect it to be a one-sided match. There'll be
Hmm.
maybe an instance where there'll be a little bit of a comeback. Maybe there'll be a spot he gets you down, but ultimately at the end of the day, because of your size and strength, you're going to win. But in a
Hmm.
match like you've had with Allen and certainly Music Man, some of those matches, I mean, those are matches where it's almost like mano a mano, or it'd be like you and
Hmm.
Joe. Joe Cobra is a big man. You're a little taller than Joe, but the point is, you'd have those matches and it's like a contest. It's a fight. It's a war. So I think maybe in a way, those matches or those type of matches also kind of maybe help you rise to the occasion, and they kind of motivate you because you can do different things. And to the audience and the viewer that's watching it on YouTube, it's kind of a match where it's almost like in boxing terms, a heavyweight title fight. It's like
Hmm.
basically what people want to see. And you feel the same way?
Yeah, definitely. So like when I'm working with someone that's smaller, it's a very easy story to tell. Big guy versus little
Yep.
guy.
Yeah.
It's not tricky. It's easy for the audience to understand. It's just right there for you. When you're two big guys, it can kind of go either way, where it's just hitting each other hard for the sake of it, or you can do something like I've tried to do and be a bit more flashy with it. So like I did a top rope coast to coast against Music Man, and the second I climbed up on that top rope, which is not somewhere that I ever go normally, I started going towards the corner and everyone was like, oh my God, what's going on? And then I got on the top rope and there's just absolute silence as you watch me jump off and then
Yep.
hit this boot and the crowd just goes mad. And that's like the best pop I've had. And that was fantastic. I mean, I can't do that every week. My back will be destroyed. But
Sure. I think there's a number of reasons why you do a spot like that. I mean, when you go way up top and you got to really know what you're doing there. And do you also feel that, and I'll come back to MBBW in a second, but do you also feel in working with, let's say, a Music Man, for example, that because you guys have been familiar with each other now for a while, that it almost made you comfortable to do that? Because, sometimes when you have a wrestler that you haven't wrestled before, it's like, okay, how do I go about this match? I mean,
Mhm.
sure, maybe I've watched them, on YouTube or I've watched the tape, but I don't know philosophically how I'm going to go about the match until maybe an hour before we get to the building, and maybe we talk about it, if we talk about it all, or even in some cases you call it out there. But did you think because you had a familiarity with both those guys, and especially a Music Man, that it made you kind of comfortable to go up and do different things you normally wouldn't do?
Yeah, definitely. Most of my matches have not been discussed until the day of the match.
Okay.
But with this one, I knew kind of a month in advance this was happening, and as soon as it was mentioned to me, like my ideas just started popping in my head, and I was so excited for it because I was like, we can do so much more that we didn't do last time, and like I say, because we know each other's moves now, there's a story to tell there. There's reversals, which are always, in my opinion, and a lot of others, like the coolest part of wrestling when you're getting like counters to counters to counters.
Yes, because then it's like, to me, that's where it builds the story. It's like, okay, now we've got something. It's like, who can get out of that submission hole? Then there was a spot in the match I think you had where you were going to be pinned early on, and then you kind of kicked out, and people were like, oh, he kicked out. Then there was like another spot, I think you got pit. He was 1, 2, and you put your foot on the rope. There was kind of like that build. I think
Mhm.
that's always what's great about wrestling, is that when you have like those counters and those 1, 2, especially in your case, because you've been so dominant that people almost are like, oh, it's almost like I do a lot of, let's say, kind of like movie reviews I've done in the past, and I always feel like what's always good about a wrestling match is if it mimics like a movie where there's
Mhm.
like that back and forth, that give and take. And I kind of felt maybe that's what also made some of your most recent work so good, is that there was kind of that ooh and ah from the crowd, and you guys were doing things, which I think, like you said, makes a wrestling match so great, is that you can kind of see those counters, the back and forth, where it makes it like it's like a real duel.
Yeah, definitely. I completely agree. It was the most fun I've had in the lead up and in a match probably ever. So I'm hoping to have more of that going forward. And it's always easier when you just know the guy as well. You don't have to worry about like walking on someone's toes because they don't want to take certain moves or anything like that. So yeah, no, it's so much easier when you know them more and you know the move set and all that kind of thing.
Sure, and I had just heard Kevin Nash talk about this in his match going with The Undertaker into WrestleMania 12, and they had worked with each other actually in Europe 25 times
Hmm.
going into it. So it was almost like they could go out there and call the match. Obviously, you and Music Man hadn't worked 25 times, but the point is that you have at least some familiarity with each other, and kind of talking about some different things and how we want to use this into NBPW. I mean, so you're going to have this big match here. We obviously expect you and Young Horse to get the job done, and we expect you guys to lead into this here for a big rest of the year in New British Promotions Wrestling. But maybe
Hmm.
talk about, I mean, what are your goals here in NBPW? I mean, what would you like to do here the rest of the year in this company?
I think it'd be great for us to establish ourselves as like the top team in MBPW. Um, There isn't a tag title at the moment. I think that's
Yep.
something that we should have and that we should be working towards as a team and as a company. So that's something I would like to see. Outside of that, there is a lot of very good wrestlers in this roster that I would love to
Oh,
face, even one on one.
1,000%. This is a roster. I mean, you've got and I said this in my interview with Paul Mallon, the legendary Paul Mallon. I mean, that this is a roster. You got veterans, you got up and comers, you got guys that have done it all across this circuit. I mean, this is a really solid roster here.
Oh yeah, definitely. And like there's a whole bunch of names of people that I can mention, but one in particular that stands out to me is Martin Kirby. He's like
Yes. Oh, Martin
British
Kirby.
wrestling
He is
royalty.
literally, he is pretty much, I don't know if there's anybody out there that wrestles as much as Martin Kirby. I mean, he literally, and he's still doing it. I mean, I have Dean Omar coming on, cheap plug, by the way. I have Dean Omar coming on Labor Day here in America, 6:00 British Standard Time. I mean, it might be Dean Omar that might have it over Martin Kirby, but Martin Kirby wrestles more, I think, than anybody, maybe even in the world, because Martin Kirby, every day I look, he wrestles. He must wrestle like 300 days a year. I don't know how he does it.
Yeah, and I've never seen him have a bad match.
I was going to say the same thing. Every time somebody tells me about Martin Kirby, and I get forwarded things all the time, I'm like, wow, how does he do that? I've seen him pretty much this year alone in like 11 promotions I've covered or something, like some crazy stat. And like I said, he even wrestles like during the week. I mean, I don't know how the guy does it. I mean, listen, I don't think anybody in WWE, AEW, Impact wrestles more than Martin Kirby. He literally is the definition of a professional wrestler.
He is, and with that kind of like pedigree, he could easily be like not a nice guy, but he's super like approachable. He gives good feedback to people and stuff, like useful feedback, I should say,
Sure.
like constructive criticism. He's not a diva in any sense of the word. He's very nice guy to have backstage, and I would love to have a singles match with him at some point in my career, and I'm sure we will cross at some point.
Well, I mean, you guys are in the same locker room. You are in the same company. And think about it here. For those that are listening and watching on Sportswire Radio, the stars could align. You've got Joshua Kemper, who's the man that everybody hears the call from, who has been a world champion, who has dominated this past year, the destruction that he's laid, the moveset that he has, the size, the strength. And then the other side, the legendary Martin Kirby, who has done it all. Think about it. It could even be a passing of the torch moment. You think about where Mr. Kemper is in his career and Mr. Kirby is in. This is a moment. If I'm a promoter right now, and especially the promoter of NBPW, who I know is going to listen to this, who's going to watch it and is out there right now on Sportswire Radio, this is a match I would put some pounds on. In fact, I'll even go even further. I have some pounds here. I'll put some pounds to this. This is a match that I personally, as the host of the Sports Report, your voice of all wrestling, the Reverend Tom Bryce, I will put my pounds on it, or dollars in American, to see this match, because this is a match I just see. It's a big man versus arguably one of the best in the business. Think about it. It could almost be our NBPW version of Shawn Michaels and Diesel. Just think about it here. I mean, I see a lot of possibilities here. This is a match that I'd like to see here coming up this year. So that's a great segue. I would love to see that match, as you could see.
Yeah, that'd be such a huge thing for me. I've faced some great wrestlers in my career so far. Some of the more experienced guys that come to mind, like I wrestled the Rebel Starbuck in Finland earlier this year.
I saw that. There was a Finland and England kind of thing there. That was so fascinating, I found.
Yeah, I was over in Finland in February for a few days. I stayed at his house and we trained at his school, Slam Wrestling.
Wow.
And then they had a show that weekend and we wrestled each other. And that was my longest match at that point. It was about 20 minutes we went.
Wow.
But it felt like a breeze because his pacing was so good. He was so experienced. He just knew what he was doing, that he kind of led me amazingly well through it. And I felt like I gained so much from that. And yeah, he was definitely somebody that stood out to me in terms of my best opponents so far. And speaking of like that kind of vibe, I'm actually going to Mexico in November.
Oh, really? Now, what promotion are you going to in Mexico? Because I have a feeling that I could probably pass along something here. Because I know my good friend Vito Fratelli, who's been on twice here, wrestles in Mexico almost every other weekend. So where are you going in Mexico to wrestle?
It's IPW Lucha Libre.
Oh, what a small world there. IPW Lucha Libre. Now, don't tell me who you're wrestling, because I don't know if the promoter would want to hear this, but I have a feeling you're going to be sharing a locker room with Vito Fratelli. I'm going to certainly tell Mr. Fratelli about you. Now, I mean, Mexico, first time to Mexico, I would imagine.
Yeah, first time as a tourist or as a wrestler.
This is a big deal. You're going to be probably going into a place where you've wrestled and you've never probably wrestled in this amount of people that you're going to wrestle in. This is kind of like a really a big deal there. I mean, you got to be real excited about this here.
Oh yeah, for sure. Like when the opportunity was presented to me, it was kind of would you be interested in this? And I was like 100%. I'd be interested in this. And they've been so accommodating so far to us in terms of like helping us with literal accommodation and like food and transport and stuff. So it's great from that perspective, but just from a learning standpoint, like Lucha Libre is so different to pro wrestling, and even wrestling from like Britain to America is different. So go into somewhere like Mexico.
Very different. The American style and the British style, it's two different styles and it's two different types of psychology. So I find that very fascinating, and that'll be November the 11th, by the way, IPW Lucha Libre, and I'll see Nathan Black is also going to be going there with you as well. Anything you want to say about Nathan Black? I know you have some history with him as well.
Nathan is the owner of Pursuit. And he is a hell of a character. You will either love him or hate him, is what I would say. I get on really well with Nathan. I think he's great.
I would think so, right? Because you're going to Mexico with him. I would have to imagine that you're going to certainly be, really, really excited to go and travel with him. And I do have a comment here, by the way, from the management of NBP Wrestling, and they say that they accept my offer. So let's do it. So you heard it here first on Sportswire Radio that you might be getting that match with Martin Kirby down the line. I mean, how does that make you feel, sir?
Hey, that would be absolutely amazing. If that comes to fruition, I will be thanking everybody involved, including yourself, Tom.
Oh, don't thank me. Thank, obviously, management for listening there. But I want to come back to Mexico for a second here before I finish the rest of the show with NBPW. I mean, when something like that happens, I mean, do you feel pressure? Do you feel like that you're on a big stage? And what are you hoping to achieve from this?
At the moment, it's more excitement. I think closer to the time, I'll feel pressure. But I've been in front of big crowds before. Like the biggest crowd I wrestled in front of was about 700 people.
Okay. That's not bad, honestly. 700 for a usual independent show, that's actually a lot. It doesn't sound like a lot, but when you're there, 700 is actually pretty big.
Yeah, like most like shows, the most common shows you would see probably about 80 to 120. So 700 was like a significant increase for me. And that I was nervous for that. That was with All Star Wrestling, who are like...
Yes, I know All Star Wrestling.
A huge company in England.
Absolutely.
So I was nervous for that, and I think by the time I get to Mexico, I'll be like, okay, I need to not be bad. I need to impress here. So
now I'm sure going to try some of the Mexican food and kind of get adjusted to the life there in Mexico.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, are you excited about that? I mean, some people. I had a friend of mine who went to Mexico before COVID, and he loved it out there. And so I mean, I'm sure you're going to be feeling the same way. I mean, you want to talk about that for the audience?
Yeah, so we're there for 5 days, and we've got a lot of stuff planned. We're going to have a bit of a tour of the city. Obviously, the show, I'm hoping to get in a bit of training as well, and just kind of taking the culture. I haven't, previously to the last like 2 or 3 years, I hadn't traveled that much, but I'm really trying to get out there more, even just in my like life away from wrestling, because you just learn so much about different people and different ways.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, listen, Jenna was here in America this year. He had traveled and he wrestled in California, actually for a promotion that I'm friends with called the Wrestling Warzone with Darrow Johnson, and he had Jenna. I mean, so I think it's great. And obviously, we see Dan Evans. I mean, for example, Dan Evans wrestles, I think, everywhere. He's pretty much wrestled in every country. He's kind of like the other, like Martin Kirby, except that he travels worldwide. So I think it's very unique that you get to do that. Now, I'm excited that you're coming to Mexico, because even though I know that you're going to be in a different company than Mr. Fratelli, I still am going to make sure that Mr. Fratelli makes a note of who you are, because I would love to see, that would be another match, you and Vito Fratelli. I mean, he's on Instagram at Real Vito Fratelli, and I look at his size and strength, and he wrestles luchadors all the time. He's this big guy that's a Sicilian powerhouse. He's a made man, and I think that's another match that I would love to see out there. If Mr. Fratelli's listening, I'm going to make sure that he's going to listen to this. I think about Joshua Kemper, 6'5", his size, his strength. his arsenal. Then I see Vito Fratelli, who's the made man, who says forget about it all the time because he lays the bodies of all the people like TJP, Alexander Hammerstone. He's the belt collector. You've been a world champion. I mean, boy, this would be another match. If you're down there and he's down there, somebody out there has to make that happen, and we'll certainly, I'm sure, let Mr. Fratelli know. But I also have to ask you about somebody else that I just watched in the ring, by the way, Jimmy Jackson. You have shared a locker room with Jimmy Jackson. I just watched his match with Gareth Angel and GT Ministries and Wrestling Church. I do a lot of work with GTM there, and Gareth has been one of my biggest supporters over the past few years. And this is another guy. I mean, I think you move a little bit like him in the ring, but there's certain things you can't do, like those, like he keeps his feet on the floor and still doesn't get eliminated from the ropes, and just like you want to talk about versatility. I've never seen anything like Jimmy Jackson's, so I have to ask you. I mean, have you learned anything from him? Because he's another guy, and he's got a massive following. He's another true pro, and love to see him in NBPW. By the way, if we're listening, management, but. Have you learned anything from Jimmy Jackson that you've applied?
Yeah, Jimmy's fantastic. So I've trained with him quite a lot, and he's helped me in ways, not even necessarily in the ring, just like advice about how to carry yourself in different promotions and stuff like that, because he's finally starting to get the recognition that he deserves.
Yes. Oh, he should. From what I've seen, I see him in Breakout Come and just in GTM, this match with Gareth Angel. And I would tell people, go to GT Ministries UK and Wrestling FCB on Facebook to watch this match. What this guy does in the ring, I mean, I've never seen it.
Yeah, so outside of wrestling, he's also into his gymnastics and I think stunt work as well.
Okay.
So he just has that crazy gymnast athleticism, and hey, I can do some stuff, but I can't do those things.
No, and I will be honest with you. What he did in the GT Ministries Rumble last month and his match he had this past weekend against Gareth, I mean, he did things that I don't think I've seen anybody do in WWE, AEW. I mean, what he does and kind of that kind of hand coordination, I mean, I've never seen anything like that. That's why I was so curious what you would learn from him. And obviously, in anybody else in NBPW that you'd like to target? I mean, John Allen's I've had on here. Paul Mallon I've had on here as well. And is there anybody else that you'd like to take on here in NBPW?
So those guys for sure. Also, CJ Banks, another big name in the scene. I would love to work with.
I'm talking about him tomorrow with Dante Durden. He's another guy who's been in the ring, I think, about 20 years now. He's another real pro.
So I've like trained a little bit with CJ and like seminars and stuff, and we've crossed paths like once in a Rumble, but we've never had like a one-on-one kind of scenario. And I'd love to have that as well at some point in my career, because he, again, similar to Martin, he's so knowledgeable, he's so active in the scene. He's one of the best in the country. So to go against someone like that is a huge accolade, regardless of what comes out of it.
I feel like with guys like that, they probably get peppered a lot. And Paul Mallon's the same way. These guys that are kind of, I mean, they're certainly professional wrestlers, the true definition of a professional wrestler, right? And I'm sure they get peppered a lot with questions and pointers for advice, but do you approach them a certain way? Do you ask them questions? I know people only get so much time with these guys, and they must hear it all the time, all day, everywhere they go. But how do you approach them?
It depends on the scenario. If it's like a training or seminar type scenario, I'm much more forthcoming with questions and stuff. And I'm usually one of the people that asks more questions. If it's at a show, sometimes I'm a bit more reserved because I know that when I'm preparing for a match, for example, I don't really want to think about other stuff. I want to be able to remember what's coming up and how I'm going to react and all these kind of things. But sometimes they'll come to, like one of the shows I did when Martin was there was when he came over and said to me that I'd done something well. And it was only a small thing. It wasn't like he wasn't saying my match was like a 5-star classic. He just said that this particular thing was great. And I was like, oh, that's phenomenal to hear from somebody like that. Is there anything else I can work on? So in that scenario, I did kind of press a little bit for a bit more critique and help, but generally I'm a little bit more reserved, and I hope people don't think that I think I'm too good.
No, you know what? I wouldn't say that, because you know what it is sometimes, and I can vouch for this because I speak with a lot of wrestlers around the world, and I'll get to another comment in a second, but sometimes you don't know how to approach people because it's almost like they get used to it all the time. I mean, listen, I think about how many wrestlers ask them for advice. Martin Kirby. I mean, every locker room he's in, you've got 15, 20 guys in there, right? They're all going to want to take his time up, and the guy's got to be able to go out and focus on his match, focus on what he's doing. So, I mean, it's a lot to take in. So, in a way, you don't want to be that person that annoys them and just kind of is in
Mhm.
their ear, because then they look at you like, okay, yeah, all right. I mean, so I get it. I mean, listen, trust me, I totally get it. And I have another comment here, which I want to get to. And I would love to see Kemper versus the juggernaut John Allen for that king of old school title. Yeah, I mean, listen, think about it, right? The new school takes the old school title. I mean, your look, I mean, John Allen's is certainly, he's been in there with Tommy Rocker. He's had some wars, but I don't know if he's been in there with somebody like a Kemper. That would be a really, really intriguing match. So, I mean, Martin Kirby's the one I'd like to see first. Obviously, you're going to get through La Flama and West Danger certainly this coming weekend, but I definitely think that Martin Kirby and you, and maybe down the road, John Allen, and I have to mention Tommy Rocker also. I mean, our champion. Love to see you,
Mhm.
because you've been a world champion recently. That would be another great match.
Yeah, absolutely. So John is someone that's definitely on my radar, someone I'd like to face. He's another big guy, experienced guy.
Yep.
But
Got a
again,
massive fan base, a massive fan base.
yeah. But like you say, I think I offer something different that he's probably not faced much, if ever, before. And again with Tommy, so I'm trying to organically build my way up through the ranks.
Sure.
Obviously, everybody wants to face the champion, but you've kind of got to be realistic as that. I need to earn that first, and then when I get there,
But I'll tell
I'm
you
going to
what,
take
if
it.
you wrestle Martin Kirby and you beat Martin Kirby, now you've
Mhm.
done a lot. There's no question that you've had a lot of success. You've done it in a short amount of time. You've got an impressive moveset. You've got the look. I see you. You look on paper like you'll be a world champion main eventer in any promotion you go to. I got all that. But if you have a win over Martin Kirby in your resume, you're going not only straight to the top, you're shooting for the stars. And you'll get that match with Tommy Rocker anytime you want. So that is the way to go, because a lot of people will come on here and say, yeah, I want the champion. Okay, but what's your resume? So to me, you get that match with Kirby, you beat Kirby. Yeah, I think you're the guy. And I think that Mr. Rocker, who's, again, phenomenal talent, phenomenal way he's carried himself and promoted the company, but you could be the guy. You could be that guy to dethrone him eventually if you get that match with Kirby. His management says they're going to do it. I'm going to stick to their word about that. And you beat him, you go right to the top automatically.
Hey, look, the sky's the limit. I don't like to be like too egotistical or anything like that, but in my career to date, I've had very few losses in singles competition. I just don't lose a lot. I'm good at what I do, and when it comes to wrestling, more so than anything else in life, I have this inbound like confidence that I can do this. And other people might think what they want about that, but I see myself as a world champion in any promotion.
Well,
So,
first of all, you look like a world champion. You talk like a world champion. You move like a world champion. If they say all of those things, that means you are a world champion. Because I look at you, now if I'm the promoter and I look at a 6'5" young guy who moves the way you do. I mean, Brock Lesnar in his prime doesn't move like you. I mean, Kane doesn't move like you in his prime. Undertaker certainly didn't. Okay, Test, but he really wasn't a draw. You're the guy that I see going right to the top. If I'm the promoter, you're the guy that I'm building the company around, because you got a certain look, you got a certain mannerism, and you got an ability, I think, that you could hold the crowd in the palm of your hands, whether they like you or not at that particular moment. So I think that you are going to be a world champion almost any promotion that you want. And I'm starting to get some comments here, because I think now we're starting to poke the bear a little bit. There's no way that John Allen can win a kick-up contest. Yeah, John Allen might be able to stand toe-to-toe with you and trade some barbs. He might be able to brawl a little bit with you, but your boot, your power bomb, your power slam, all of that, I mean, it's going to be very tough for Mr. Allen, I think. They may call him the juggernaut, but he might be kind of in over his head, you might want to say, if he were to have that match with you.
hey, he's no slouch by any means.
No, he's
but
not. He's not.
Like I say, I'm putting together a resume, an arsenal, whatever you want to call it, of just credibility behind me in terms of athleticism that I feel like I've always had. Now I'm starting to get the wrestling mind where I feel like I'm really confident in the ring. I can talk. If you look at my promos, everyone
I
has
watched
been
the
impressed
one
with
you
my
did
promos.
before the match with Alan Kay. Then you did the one before with Music Man. I mean, you're coming out there, and for a guy that said I had anxiety issues and mental health and all these different crazy thoughts, I mean, you're a guy that I definitely, like I said, if I got a promotion, I'm building it around you. I mean, listen, forget about the tag match with Young Horace. Obviously, look, I mean, I'm going to totally just go off the cliff here, but forget about tag matches. I want to see you in some singles matches because we got some big draws in MPBW, and I want to see you go forward with that.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, especially when it comes to the promo side of things, in BritWres, and I don't know what it's like in the American Indies, but in BritWres, nobody wants to talk. Nobody wants to get on the microphone.
So I mean, yes, people. So there is a growing movement in the American Indies that people want to talk. In the British independent scene, yeah, it's give or take. I mean, I've had some promotions, like I've had RPD a bunch of times, and I think RPD is the best talker right now in the British independents as champions. Then there's some other guys and companies that, if you basically put their life on the line, they really couldn't promote themselves. I mean, so it's kind of like, it depends. I don't want to single guys out, but there are some companies that have had champions that, what they do is their ring ability. No question as to why they're a champion. But I think you have conducted yourself that you've become a pretty good promo guy. And, you're a guy that could definitely, carry a conversation or two. And I think that bodes well for any champion.
Yeah, I think so as well. I think you can have all those things. You can have the athleticism, the strength, the speed, blah, 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 and be great in the ring. But that if you don't have that extra bit, you're putting a ceiling on yourself.
Absolutely.
And I don't want a ceiling on myself. I want to be at the top. So I didn't like getting on the microphone when I first started. It scared the hell out of me. But I was like, I'm going to do this and I'm going to be good at it because otherwise I'm not going to be a champion.
Nash and Batista would be two examples of big men. They didn't talk for a long time. I mean, Batista didn't become this guy you see on movies overnight. Kevin Nash as Diesel didn't talk for like 19 months in his run until he really became the champion. I mean, not every big man kind of takes a talk, and The Undertaker didn't talk for years. I mean, Kane, we didn't know Kane could talk for years. So not every big man kind of takes to that likiness. So I think you're getting there. I think that you're one of these guys that I just see almost like putting a piece to a puzzle. And as we're coming to the end of the show here, I get a lot of wrestlers that come on that maybe even have less experience than you or kind of transitioning to independence or pros, whatever you want to call it. But do you have any advice for those types of wrestlers?
What, just people that are trying to be like up and coming?
Yeah, like do you have any? Because I get a lot of these guys that come on and from different places, and they're kind of making a transition into the independence or become a pro. Do you have any advice for them?
My advice would be work hard, which is kind of generic, but I don't think there's many people that work harder than me when it comes to training. In the last few months, have trained, like I say, I was over in Finland. I'm going to Mexico. But I've also been, as well as my regular training with Liam Slater and Marty Jones, I've trained with...
Yeah, if you train with Marty, you are definitely going through the ringer. That I know, because I know Marty Jones a little bit. So
I've also trained with Nathan Cruz, Robbie X.
I know Robbie X very well, sure.
Yeah. If you're not learning from different people, you're not going to get different perspectives, and you need that. It's all well and good getting a lot from one person, but you can get more from a lot more people. So my advice would be get as much information from as many people and as many experiences as you can, and don't think that you're ever in a position to stop learning, because people who are 50 plus years old at the top of their game, they're still learning, and they will say that.
Hey, listen, I had Joel on last week, Joel Cobra. Joel Cobra was talking about the fact that, even though he's basically a peer of Sean Only's, he takes advice from Sean Only. He has no problem doing that. Even though he's been in the business, his family name, he said that, look, I don't have a problem saying that, look, I need to learn. There's things I have no problem asking, and I think it doesn't matter who you are and what your stature is. I think that if you can learn from somebody that knows something that you don't, why not? I mean, listen, there's plenty of people that are better than me in this. I mean, I listen to podcasts all the time. I talk to people. I do a radio show Wednesday nights where I talk about news, and I'm always learning from people. So I think there's always that way. It's a good thing. I think that, if you go into this the right way and you've got that right frame of mind, you're going to certainly go big places, not only just in NPPW, but the rest of the world here. And I'm looking forward to seeing you in Mexico. I'm going to definitely tell Mr. Fratelli about you. And also Finland, you've been. That's a very, very cool thing. It reminds me so much of Dan Evans. But I wanted to ask you, before we come up to the show here on Friday, getting ready for Bank Holiday weekend, give me your final words for La Flama and West Danger.
My final words: be prepared, because one way or another, I'm coming into this with full force. And whether or not I can get on the same page as Horace, you need to worry about Kemper because I'm the biggest guy, not just in that ring, but in that roster. So be ready because I'm coming at you like a freight train.
The old adage is prepared to lead, ready to serve. I think he's going to be prepared to lead and ready to serve his big boot toward La Flama and West Danger. That is why his name is Kemper. He is on Instagram at the Joshua Kemper, on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube. I also want to say hello to our friends over at the IMF in Iowa. They basically have breaking news there that they have between Jordan Nets and Omen Black tables match for the title. Daniel Banner, who's training in GT Ministries, says hello. Great stuff there. So I want to give you the opportunity for some closing thoughts. Anything else you want to plug, share, or say here? And it's been a tremendous honor. I definitely want to hear more of you. I'm really looking forward to watching you more in the ring, and definitely maybe getting a chance to watch you here in Mexico, not too far away from here, and maybe having you back on in Sportswire very, very soon. And the floor is yours, my friend, and fire away.
Well, thank you for that again. And as you've said, like I'm across all social media as the Joshua Kemper, TikTok as well. I'm also on there.
I keep forgetting TikTok because I'm not on TikTok. That's the one I haven't basically taken to yet. But yeah, TikTok, good point.
Yeah. But otherwise, just watch this space because I haven't had the level of confidence that I have now up until this point, and I'm starting to feel the momentum behind me. And I'm not top of the card in every single show I'm on, but I will be. So just keep your eyes on me because I feel like the sky's the limit. And
it's gonna come.
Even though I've always felt that I'll get there eventually, that day is feeling closer and closer and closer. So just watch the space.
Ladies and gentlemen, he is 6'5". He has a size 16 shoe. What he does in the ring for a big man, very few people can top. He's going to be at the top of the card sooner, very sooner, rather than later. So it's going to happen, and you've just got to deal with it and accept it. That's why we have heard the call tonight. We certainly don't want to be in that void when he puts that finisher down and it calls 1, 2, 3 in his favor. This is Kemper. Cannot wait to see him as a part of Bank Holiday Weekend from our friends over at NBPW. It is going to be a great show. Go out there. Still a few tickets available. Check them out. And it's going to be adults, early bird tickets, £8, children, $6, front row seats, only £10. The whole family can go for £19. That is why you want to check this out. The doors open at 6:30. Our time here in the UK. So make sure you go out and support this great show at the Wakefield Rycroft Leisure off Mulberry Avenue. Congratulations on all the success. I look forward to having you on here very, very soon. Cannot wait to talk about that match maybe with you and Mr. Kirby real soon. I'm going to hold management to that. And thank you so much for your time. It's been an honor, and I can't wait to do it again real soon. And good luck on Friday.
Thank you, Tom. I really appreciate it.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, that was Kemper, who's going to be in the ring here for our friends at New British Promotions Wrestling this Friday. At Bank Holiday Weekend, he'll be teaming with Young Horace against the team of La Flama and West Danger. My name is the Reverend Tom Bryce, the man behind Sportswire Radio, and I'll be back tomorrow again with more NBPW coverage with Dante Durden. He'll be in the ring with CJ Banks in a no DQ Falls Count Anywhere match. Please follow our friends at NBPW on Instagram and Facebook and YouTube at NBP Wrestling. Check them out. And also, again, speaking of legends, Dean Allmark is here Labor Day weekend in America, 6 p.m. Monday, British Standard Time on the 4th of September. That is going to be one I promise you you're not going to want to miss. I'm very excited about that, just as excited as I was to have Kemper here. But if you're on sportnarium.com/player, you go back to your regularly scheduled programming. If you're on YouTube and Twitter, I'll be back here tomorrow at 9 p.m. British Standard Time with the one and only Dante Durden. Good night, good morning, good afternoon, wherever you are on the number one global radio station that is Sportswire